Hi Gavin, welcome to Café 21. You're in the hot seat today. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Ross. How are you? All right?
Yeah, not too bad, Gavin. Not too bad. This is all about you though, so we'll fire into some of the questions here. Your career so far has included extensive work as a TV anchor and as a presenter, particularly covering sports stories, lots of sports news and sports programs. But what are kind of some of your standout moments from your career up to this point?
I think it's a very good question. Because like you say, it's doing so much over the years. You kind of take it for granted a little bit sometimes, but there have been some really incredible moments, and some ones that really do stand out. And I suppose the big career milestones have been covering the Olympics back in when they were in the UK, when they were in London, because obviously that's the home city where I live in, and there's no sort of more special moment than seeing the world effectively descend on your city for a global celebration for 2.5 weeks or so. And it was that was probably one of the most magic moments. And then there've also been several shoots over the years that have been really surreal and really incredible, one of them being a golf charity day with Samuel L. Jackson. That was just an incredible moment,
Wow,
because
yeah.
there were a few other sort of celebrities involved in it, but I was his caddy for the day. And I sort of got to spend pretty much 3 hours or so one-on-one time. Wasn't big, some of it was being filmed, but not all of it. Like only probably about 5 minutes of it was filmed we did an interview, of course, with him and stuff for TV. But yeah, only the kind of like special moments where it was just me and him driving along in the caddy, like where you sort of get to see the real guy, like no cameras, no like kind of nothing going on. It's just, that was very, very surreal. And over the years, I've come across so many sort of amazing people that have been instrumental to modern life. I'm just looking at my wall now, and I've got some photos of shoots I've done and sort of studio days. And there's David Cameron when he was Prime Minister of the UK, and David Attenborough, Usain Bolt. So yeah, there's some big names that I've been lucky enough to have met and interviewed. But yeah, I suppose the other career highlights, I suppose, as well, was one of my first jobs in TV was being a children's TV presenter. And in terms of impact, that's an incredible thing to do, because you're impacting on the formative years of someone's life. From the ages of say 7 to 12, where you're becoming you're forming your opinions and your views at that point in your life, and they go on to dictate the rest of your opinions and thoughts for the rest of your kind of adolescence and then adult life. And I was very privileged to have been a presenter on Newsround, which is a children's BBC show,
Mhm.
as one of my first jobs in TV and my first on-air job.
You mentioned the Olympics in 2012 there. That's probably one of the, seen as, to me at least, one of the turning points in a shift towards kind of online content and particularly focusing on tech, especially for big sporting events like that. As you know, sports industry is probably one of the biggest in the world, which in turn kind of makes sports journalism one of the most competitive industries to break into. What kind of advice do you have for any aspiring journalists out there, particularly trying to break into that sports industry, to try to make an impact and kind of stand out from the pack?
I think it's a very pertinent question at the moment. We're in an age where opportunities and places are quite scarce, due to I think a lot of people not necessarily having the doors open as they were because of the pandemic and because of financial and other constraints. But I think that in anyone trying to make their impact and make their noise and make their voices heard now, you've got to think about what people want to know and what they want to hear, and you've got to think about kind of original and genuine stories, and you've got to be able to communicate those in a way that people want to listen to them. And that can be across any medium. It could be through video, it could be through audio, it could be through online writing, it could be through social media. There's so many ways to get access to people now. It's not just TV, radio, and that's it. Back in the day when I was starting out, the internet wasn't really anything. There was websites were still kind of part and parcel of a regime, but websites are now integral, and social media is now integral to everything. So I think it's a good question. I think you've got to think, the term 360 is often overused, but you do have to think in the whole dimension and the whole package of what it is you're offering. So many ways you can do content now. So it's not necessarily just about, getting in and working your way up from, like, say, a local outlet. There's so many different angles to go in at now. And so there's no barriers, basically. There's no barriers. So therefore you can make the world your own. So that's how I would sort of approach it, really, if I was starting out now.
Yeah, it's very good advice. I mean, you mentioned the internet wasn't really a thing when you were first starting out, but now, as you say, it's such an integral element to any journalist's portfolio of work, and reaching an audience and building a brand for themselves. Particularly now in 2020. But how do you see this industry kind of moving forward? Are some of these changes here to stay potentially?
Yeah, I think they are here to stay. I think it's kind of, the way that the world has been moving the last few years, not just from a media space, but from a retail space, from a creative sense all around. Anything that involves a bit of creativity, it's been kind of going towards more on demand and more tailored offerings, really, I think. And so I can see that the way that the industry is shaping up, it's becoming more about kind of what people want when they want it. And I think that is going to become, it's already a thing now, but it's going to become even more commonplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those changes are definitely here to stay, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
it's going to be very interesting how we go into the next decade, of course, how the industry develops, I think, personally. And finally, I guess, where can we find your work, Gavin? Where's best to go for our audience to kind of find out what you do and find out a bit more about you?
Yeah, so you can find out more about me I've got my own personal website where I put stuff on, which is gavinramjaun.com. And you can also watch what I'm up to on BBC News and BBC Sport. So the varying days that I'm on. So you just have to watch all the time, basically. Hopefully you get lucky or unlucky. So yeah, there's loads of places you can catch it with TV stuff and with online bits. And I also have my own social media outlets at Gavin R Official, which is for my Instagram and Twitter. So I kind of keep sort of posting bits that I'm up to there. And then I have my own YouTube, which is just my name, Gavin Ramjaun, which I talk about men's mental health and men's status on there, and sometimes a bit of news as well. But the big thing that I'm working on at the moment that I'm really passionate about, and I feel is something that needs to be talked about more, is about men's health and men's status and men's identity. And I've launched a platform called Manzilla, which is a men's status news website and social media offering, with a podcast as well, for trying to cater towards a generation of men that are struggling to adapt to change, really. So it's sort of like 25 to 50-year-old men who are in that bracket of going through what the new world is offering and talking about, and sort of raising issues that they may not be so comfortable with. Lots of changing definitions for things, lots of changing ideas that a lot of sort of men particularly struggle with, and I think, and they bottle up emotions and they don't necessarily talk about stuff that's important to them, and because of many factors, stereotypical generally, but often it's down to a pride thing and an ego thing. So I've launched this offering, Manzilla, and I want to try and make sort of men feel more comfortable about talking about issues that are important, really. And that's primarily a podcast at the moment, but there's news and articles and thinking developing as well on that. So that's the Manzilla Men's podcast on all the podcast providers, and it will be man-zilla.com for the website when it's ready, probably early 2021.
Yeah, very, very cool, and a very touching subject, I think, to invest some of your spare time. I know you're a very busy individual, especially working for the BBC in your journalism career. So obviously encourage all viewers to go and follow the podcast and the news. That's Manzilla. So thank you very much, Gavin, for sitting in the hot seat today. You've been very insightful in the industry, particularly in journalism, of course. We hope to see more from you in the future.
Cheers, Ross. Much appreciated. Thanks for your time.